All right, so for chapter 10, we see Gerda as she's getting moved into a new camp. We kind of see an instance of bystanders here. I will just read this section. They herded us onto the station platform. Porters were running to and fro. People streamed past, and the green gray uniforms of German soldiers were everywhere. Life was going on. A war was being fought, and many people walked about in their busy, free lives. Only we were slaves. So we see, we kind of, what do you take for granted? What are you missing if you're not paying attention? What's going on? Are there people in trouble? So they go to a new camp called Grunberg. Gerda describes it as beautiful, a cruelty set against the backdrop of beauty. So it's in a really beautiful area of Germany, very mountainous and lots of trees, but they are extremely, extremely cruel. And she described it as just filled with suffering. They're starving more than ever at this camp, and the guards are absolutely vicious, like abusing them any and all at all times. There's routine beatings in the shower, just horrible, horrible things. So, Gerda gets put on the worst job. So there's the job called the Spinnerei, where they're working on these like big machines, and you have a high risk of tuberculosis because there's a lot of like dust and particles in the air. So people say once you get this job, you don't live very long. So they get tuberculosis exams once every 2 months. There we go, to see if they're healthy. And if they have tuberculosis in their lungs, they're immediately sent to Auschwitz to die. So Gerda, is kind of pleading. She says, "Arthur, be with me. I'm so afraid," in her mind, as she's waiting to get scanned because she doesn't want to die. And luckily, she's clear. She has no tuberculosis, but her friend does. Not Susie or Ilsa, but just like a new friend she had made. And her story is really cool, so I'm going to read it really quickly. So as she came closer, I remembered our sad farewell in Grunberg before she had left for Auschwitz. As she embraced me, we both started to cry. Then she told me what happened. When her group reached Auschwitz, they were taken to the death house, but traffic was heavy there. Things were so busy, they had to wait for death. As she sat on the ground, she idly dug into the soil, of which she was soon to become a part. The gesture was her salvation, for she unearthed a handful of gems. To what forgotten soul had they belonged? The girl was momentarily dazed. Then she ran up to an SS guard. What had she to lose? "Help me," she pleaded, and gave him the bundle. "I want to live." Somehow he got her and 2 other girls from her group places to work in the kitchen. That parcel of gems saved 3 lives, even though the guard could have taken the gift and refused to help the girls. When she finished her story, I asked the girl about her lungs. She smiled. "That is another strange story. I went to a number of doctors, but they found nothing wrong. Perhaps that is another miracle, or perhaps the doctor in Grunberg made a mistake." Whatever the explanation was, the girl had been given back her life. I just thought that story was crazy, and I definitely didn't want you to miss that. It's, something good amidst absolute horrors. So things keep going on, and she starts imagining, what, parties she would go to and, what clothes she would wear, just to, pass the time, these imaginary things. She, again, contemplates suicide because she's like, what's the point of all this suffering? But then, right at her darkest moment, Ilsa, she miraculously finds a raspberry and gives it to Gerda. She doesn't keep it for herself. She gives it to her friend. And Gerda herself, as an adult many years later, reflects. She says, "Imagine a world where your only possession is a raspberry and you give it to a friend." And I think that highlights just what a good friend Ilsa is, giving her that raspberry. And that kind of kept Gerda going, just like that little bit of sweetness and hope. So they continue working under horrible conditions, and that's basically the gist of chapter 10. She's working at the most brutal job, and is being very seriously starved and abused at this camp that they're at. We'll pick up on chapter 11, which is the beginning of the death marches.